What's going on today, Internet? Selfish here with Retrospect. Today we're going to take a look at the Beitong Asura 2Pro controller. After reviewing some less than stellar controllers this year, there's been but a few diamonds in the rough. I had to go back to a couple of my favorite controllers to make sure I was actually reviewing the Pro 2 accurately, and this is what I learned. Let's take a look. This is the box for the Asura 2 Pro controller, and these are the things that come inside of it. You do have a little quick guide that tells you to go download an app. You do have an origami accordion. It's more like a origami flip book. This just kind of gives you button placement layout. I'll definitely keep track of this because this also tells you to go download the app, and then you also do have a dongle, so you can run this thing wirelessly, and you do have a cable, which you can use to run wired. Or, if you're fancy and want to use the program, you also need this because you can't do it without it. Let's get this stuff out of the way. Because the last thing that comes in here, and this is a spectacularly pretty handheld, if there ever was one to see. I actually painted a car this color once. I know it's hard to believe. It's a green, purple, and blue mixture. It's kind of hard to tell in this lighting, but it will change colors between green, purple, and blue, and it's when chameleon paint first became popular. That's right, I was all over it. One thing I didn't think about when I was wiping everything off my desk was I still needed the dongle in order to be able to demonstrate this thing. We're going to kick it right off by doing the I.O., and then I'll talk about some specs here real quick. We'll start on the top like we always do. We do have our shoulders, which are nice. They got a really light click to them. And then we do have some Hall effect linear analog triggers, which are nice to see, especially if you want to get into some racing games. These will work really well for that. We do have a Type-C hole, and this is going to be your data port for running wired, as well as using it to make changes on the application, which we will get into here in a minute. On the back down here, we got a really cool sticker. No, I'm just kidding. We do have our M1 and M2 buttons. They're actually not that bad to push. They're a little stiff, which is exactly how I like them. If they're too loose, I'll hit them all the time on accident because I don't use these buttons. I haven't ever figured out how to use these buttons properly. My Steam Deck is begging me to use these buttons. I've tried like different covers and things for them too, to like change the height and all that kind of stuff. I still haven't figured out a way to use them that I'm comfortable using them. So I usually just set them to like my face button keys, and if I accidentally hit them, I stab somebody or something, depending on what game I'm playing. And then there is also this cover right here, and this is for your USB dongle. Look at that. Most of the controllers, in fact, I think all but one other controller I looked at this year didn't have a place to put your dongle. So I just have a pile of dongles sitting around here, and I don't know what any of them do. I actually had to get a label maker for my dongles, and I haven't labeled them yet. So now they're randomly all just sitting there in a pile still, and I still don't know what goes to what. I can guess my way through it usually, but sometimes I'm stuck for a while. But as we move right along, obviously, there's nothing on the sides of this like a handheld would have, and there's nothing on the bottom. Kind of bummed that there isn't a mic slot on the bottom here. I feel like with the feel of this controller, there should have been a mic slot, but there's not. We do have our face buttons here. These are actually really nice. They feel exactly like an Xbox 360's face buttons, and if you look, they have the exact same travel as well, and they are kind of that candy-coated button that you'd get like, it's like, I used to call them the M&M or Skittle buttons. They're not Skittle buttons though, because they're always colorful, but it is that candy coating on the outside, and you can see it just by looking at it, but very, very similar to the Xbox 360. We do have our home button right here in the middle, which is like all the controllers I try to put a home button on. Not exactly my favorite feature. They just never look right. Xbox figured it out, but nobody's ever been able to mimic it. I don't know. I think they always look wonky. We do have a back and start button, so these are going to be your select and start essentially. You have a shift button, and then you have a turbo function. And you know what's really cool about using turbo on a controller? Because I don't, because I have never used it before. That's not true. I do use it to fast forward sometimes, but I don't set it as a turbo button. I will set it to fast forward in an emulator. I guess it is kind of the same idea though, right? I don't know. And then we have our D-pad. This D-pad is solid. It's a good D-pad. It's not like earth-changing or game-changing, but it is a good D-pad. It works decent for fighting games. It's got a decent amount of pivot to it. We can take a look at it here. It doesn't bottom out or get stuck. You can't lay it flat-footed because there is a pivot in the middle, which there always should be, but for some reason, more and more, we've been seeing them without it, and they suck. So this one's got everything you'd want to be able to do both fighting and just use as a reference pad. I typically, on a controller, if I'm playing on a computer, I'm playing Call of Duty, I'm playing Fortnite, something, I'm doing first-person shooters, I'm just using this as a reference pad for extra keys, essentially. Now, you know, you have to have your reloads and all that stuff typically fall within this, or weapon change, or whatever. These don't need to be life-changing for me on a controller like this, but these actually are pretty decent, or this is pretty decent. It's just not anything spectacular, and it has these really ugly ridges on it. I don't know why that's driving me insane, but it is. And then we do have some Hall effect joysticks, and these aren't too bad. They have good motion to them. They are a little clunky, And I think I know why, and I'll get into that here in just a minute. They do not have slip rings. They're not removable, and they do not have slip rings on them. So this controller, I think they just molded an Xbox 360 controller, because it's pretty damn close. I mean, this is the closest I've had. I was going to grab an Xbox 360 controller out of the mothballs, but I just decided that I don't know what box it's in storage. Well, I'm not in my studio right now. I was going to compare it, but this feels, in all memory, the buttons here and the controller feel in your hands, and literally these joysticks, now these are Hall effect, where the 360 didn't use Hall effect. These actually have a little bit more resistance too, which is kind of something I think the 360 controller was missing. I think they have more it's been a while, but it feels like they have more resistance, but they feel really nice in here. 360 also makes this clacking noise. So I think that they really did a good job of trying to just make a 360 controller with some extra features, which I'm totally fine with. There's 2 decent rumble motors in here, 1 in each hand, and you can control these motors also through the software. So it is pretty cool. I'll go through a little bit of the data of my testing on this, and then I'll try to play some gameplay data. I don't know what I have that isn't corrupted. I did just get a new video card, so going forward, I should be able to get some decent video. I haven't set it up or anything, and my old card just kept corrupting data, so I should have some gameplay data, but if I don't, I do definitely have some video with aim labs, as well as using the software for this, and I think it's important to go into that. You can't really make any changes or do any programming on this controller without the software, which might seem a little crazy in 2024, but the software is free and it's very intuitive, and so I don't have a problem with it. You can go in there to program your M1, M2. You can change the calibration of your sticks. You can recalibrate your triggers. You can set profiles specifically for a game, so they're game specific. So if you want your controller laid out specifically for a game, and all the way down to a character in that game, if you want to even get that fancy, you can set different profiles for each character, so if you want them to play differently. I'm a big gamer. I've never gotten that into the woods on setting up like your controls before, but now that I know people do it, I'm kind of curious. I might have to try it out. There has to be an advantage, otherwise people wouldn't do it. So yeah, I might learn today. I don't know. We'll see if I have some time and I can really dig into it, because I'm kind of curious a little bit. So in your calibration, you can move all your buttons around if you want. You can go into switch style. You can go into picture style, or whatever they call it, icon style, or I don't know. You'll see it when you hit the button. It just means PlayStation. So it's your triangle, square, X, and what's the other one? Triangle, square, X, and O. Duh. The buttons themselves won't physically change what they say on them, obviously, but they will work in the order that they're supposed to for the specific system. This will also let you go in and calibrate your joysticks if needed. I am not going to do that right now. In fact, I'm going to run these on 0 dead zone because of how good these joysticks work, and I will show you that here in the gamepad test. One thing I did screw up while I was filming this is I accidentally swapped my D-pad and my joysticks, but I didn't actually film that part for somehow, but I did it while I was in here. So don't do that, because then you're going to go and try to do. So I was doing aim labs, and my entire video, you'll notice I'm just using the right stick and moving my body to aim. So it's going really slow because my left stick and my D-pad were swapped, and it took me a while to figure it out. I just went back and tried it again. Works just fine. I just don't have the new video card ready to go quite yet. So unfortunately, I just have to be an idiot, and you guys get to see that instead of it being corrected. The joystick calibration on here is pretty awesome. Joystick calibration on here does work pretty good. So just so you're aware, if you need to calibrate, you can. It is kind of cool too. You do have some high performance modes. You do have more delicate modes, or if you want a softer experience, so it's more of a handoff for when you're moving your joystick, so it doesn't get jerky at all, because you can get that under like a high performance mode. You can get some jerking action when it does zero back out, so you're going to eliminate some of that. So that is in there, and it's really intuitive, really easy to use. Now here's the secret about the software though. If you scan it before you install it, it's going to tell you it could have malware. Now I know if you're into emulation or into gaming in general, this is going to be a surprise to you. I'm sure you've never ever downloaded an emulator before, because every single one I've ever downloaded to my PC says it might contain malware. And I'm sure, you've never had a game that you got somewhere that said it might contain malware, but then you install it and everything's fine. That was my experience. I said, screw it. I have a mini PC I installed the software on just because I wanted to be cautious. I'm always cautious. If companies often aren't in charge of their own software, there's usually some IT department that they hire that out to. So just to be cautious, I always do it that way. He told me I was going to have malware, or I could have malware. I installed it. Everything's fine. But I'm going to tell you this. Do take the precautions that you are comfortable with, because just because I had a good experience with it doesn't necessarily mean everybody will. But I can't imagine anybody else's would be different if they're downloading the same file that I was. But I guess there could be an update there someday when you watch this in the future. Who knows? But I'm just letting you know that's on you. But when it popped up and said, do you still want to run this? I said, heck yeah, I do. And I moved on. When it comes to calibration on this, the tolerances for these joysticks are incredible. Averaging at about a 0.9% fail rate, wireless and wired. That is crazy. It's got a polling rate of right around 340 to 345, depending on if you're wired or wireless. That is a good number for a PC controller at this price range. It's pretty impressive, actually. And to have such a low error rate, and this is why I'm comfortable running this with like a 0 dead zone, because it's just centering out. It's got a good polling rate. Everything's working exactly the way you want it to. So I have no problem doing that, and it works well on this handheld. I played Fortnite with it. I've played Call of Duty with it. Mostly I played Cyberpunk with it, and I have had no problems with it. In fact, I like this controller so much that when I started to do this review, over the last couple of weeks as I've been testing this and trying to create footage for this final review here, I just keep playing games. Usually when I go through to test things like this, I do it in 10 to 20 minute snippets just to get through different parts so I can test different elements of the controller itself. And so different games, I know where it's going to stress test better for, I don't know, jumping a lot, or shooting a lot, or shooting and throwing grenades at the same time, or standing on one foot and rubbing your belly. You learn where those spots are in games, and it's usually a 10 to 20 minute segment that kind of goes in rushes throughout video games. Every time I went to play those, though, I just kept playing the games. And it doesn't happen very often that any device in this space pulls me into gaming unless I intentionally go in and want to play video games. So that is a huge win for this controller, and a big reason why this is one of my favorite controllers I've looked at this year. Now, my initial aim-lab tests, yes, these were a little sad, and that is because I was trying to do them, again, with my left joystick and stuff all screwed up. I didn't realize, so I usually use aim-lab a different way, and I actually downloaded it to Steam, because I just realized it was on Steam. I don't know how I didn't know that before, but I didn't. So I downloaded it to Steam, and so I thought maybe just the program was different, so maybe you couldn't use the left joystick, and so I was walking around and shooting in slow-mo, is what you're going to see here. I mean, it's not really, it's just as fast as you can possibly go, but it's slow-mo because I'm using my body instead of moving my upper torso. I did figure this out after the fact, because I actually played with it some more today, after I figured out that I needed to recalibrate the controller inside of Steam. And once I did that, perfect. Worked a lot better. I broke all the records I had already broke to begin with, and I actually got some stars, which, and I just didn't have any from testing this previously because, I mean, it was kind of hard to hit stuff. I mean, I was still hitting some pretty decent rates, but it wasn't good because it was slow. My accuracy was good. Speed was not so good. So now we're all zeroed in and set up and everything, and we can go and play our games. But instead of playing games right now, we're going to talk a little bit more about this controller. I'm going to go through my pros and cons of the Asura Pro 2 and let you know what I do and don't like about it after using it here for a couple of weeks and really getting a good feel for it. Just because this is one of my favorite controllers this year doesn't mean that there aren't some things that could get fixed, but remembering that you're getting all this at a budget price. I know everybody puts Pro controller on their controllers, but you really are getting a Pro controller here at a budget price. Can I say that one more time? No, I don't need to. All right, so we'll go through a couple things here. So your triggers here, they work well. They do everything that they're advertised to do, and then some probably. I do wish that there was a stopgap in here for first-person shooters, so you weren't pulling all the way back. Now, you can go in and change where your dead zones are on here, or you can change how far you need to pull, but if it has that stopgap in the middle where it doesn't push back as far, that's going to be a huge advantage on a first-person shooter. And I'm sure that, again, at this price, and with everything else that this offers, there's going to be some sacrifices, and I think that's a really easy one to sacrifice, so I'm not really knocking them for it. I just wish that feature was there, or if it had like the locks in here, even, so you could just lock it. But again, for the price, you really can't go wrong. Also, if you decide you want this, there's going to be a link down on my thingamabob, but we'll talk more about that later. The shoulder buttons are nothing special. They're nothing to write home about. They feel like normal shoulder buttons. They're not rattly. They're not super loud when you click them. They're just run-of-the-mill shoulder buttons, and I'm totally cool with that. They're pretty responsive, and they got a little bit of pep in their step, so they're not terrible. The face buttons, I think, like I said before, have a decent amount of travel. They're a little soft as far as when they come back and rebound, but they do well, and I have actually had no problems in games. Sometimes you worry that you might just, like, not push the button all the way, and especially if they're a little bit softer, you're gonna not have it work, but I've never had that happen with this controller anyways, so not a problem at all. I do wish that this D-pad here didn't look like it was out of a children's toy. I know they're trying to make it look fancy by adding these ridges on here, but it really cheapens up the product. Again, I understand that this is a really good value for what you're getting, so I'm really nitpicking here. I'm imagining that when the engineers made this, and I haven't looked at the next step up, maybe 2 steps up, but they were like, all right, so for the first 1 or 2 within the system, we're gonna put these ridges on there. It really bothers somebody, they're just gonna upgrade to a more expensive controller, because that's how my brain works. If I was going to go purchase it in the store and I saw another one and it's like, oh, it has more features and it doesn't have those stupid ridges on there, probably going to buy the more expensive controller. So I understand what they were doing there, but I don't like it. I'm sure they're there for grip or something, but I'm not a fan. I do wish that the joysticks also did have the slip rings and have the metal shafts on them that most Pro controllers have. You know, that almost pulls it out of that Pro controller category, except for everything works so well on here. It really does feel like a Pro controller, but I do miss having the metal slip rings and everything on here. These work fine today, and they are Hall Hall effect joysticks, so they could last forever, but they're not going to last forever if you're getting into some heavy gaming sessions and you're just knocking these things around. It's not going to protect those sticks, and eventually the plastic's going to start to chip away at both the surround of the stick and the stick itself. So to prevent that, and also just give you a little bit more smoother mechanics, it would be better to have the metal post, you know, with the slip rings on here. And my most pet peeve of a flaw of this handheld is this right here. This home button that everybody tries to make. They suck. Now, you only need this to connect, and then after that, it's just an RGB light, which is great, but it's still ugly. I mean, that is the worst looking part of this entire... Look at how nice this controller looks. And then you have that thing. The colors don't match the controller. It's just that the white ring for the RGB is gross. Also, you can't hold it, turn it off. You have to hit the back button and B to turn this thing off. You gotta hold them for like 5 seconds, I think. There you go. It doesn't even work to turn it off. It literally is just to turn the controller on. So I feel like we could probably make a different button do that. Make this a solid piece. And you can still put your RGB lights in there if you wanted to. But I mean, look at it. Just they're sloppy. Just a cheap button. They're always an afterthought. I know they got their logo in there, but this is just an afterthought from some engineer. I mean, who wants that? Look at that thing. Yeah, I think it just wrecks the entire facade of the controller. And part of that is just because it doesn't match. But it's also just ugly. This clear plastic on the outside is ugly. Okay, I'm done ranting about it. So all that aside, this is a phenomenal controller. This is made for PC gaming. So with your D-pad and everything, you're not going to use this much. Like I said, you're going to just use it for like selecting weapons and things like that. You're going to be using your sticks because you're going to be PC gaming with this. So I think that solves that problem. Also, it's very low latency with or without the USB-C cable. So you can be away from your computer a little bit, or you can be close. So if you're like me and my computer's in a cabinet, I'm just using a mini PC I use for testing. It's sitting in a cabinet. Fine. It works just fine. It's working through the cabinet, and I'm not seeing latency at all. But I do have a little hub block up here, so if I need to, I could plug in that USB. I think that that's a great option. Also, the fact that they actually put a thing in here for your dongle. I don't know why they stopped doing this. Companies stopped doing this, and it was so innovative 10 years ago when companies started doing this, and now they don't do it anymore. And I just have all these dongles and nowhere to put them. Now, part of the problem is some companies are making some pretty damn big dongles, and I don't think it's necessary, but, you know, we can take it up with them. It's like using old tech and bringing it back again, and I absolutely am here for it. I don't know why everybody doesn't still do this. And the tops of these joysticks, they're a little weird. I mean, they're fine. They kind of sort of imitate Switch-style sticks, but I got a box full of stick caps, so that's not even worth complaining about. So really, anything that I have negative about this controller, which is just because I'm getting nitpicky with it, and it's because I spend a lot of time with it. I think it's perfect the way that it is. Those are just things that maybe I would change if I was in charge of changing things on here. But that's about it. This controller's been a lot of fun. Again, it is really one of my favorite controllers this year. If you want to pick one of these up for yourself, I'll put an Amazon link down on my thingamabob for you to go check it out. I also did put this on my creator store on Amazon, so if you want to go check it out on there, there's a link to that down on my thingamabob as well. Go check that out. I got a bunch of stuff on there. I'm just starting to put it together though, so I'm trying to get everything that I reviewed this year, but I didn't realize I reviewed like 100 handhelds, so I got a ways to go. I guess I'm catching up to you. Maybe in my travels in like a week, I'll have time at the airport. I'm sure my wife won't want to talk to me or something. I don't know, but we'll work on that. But if you have any questions about this controller, please feel free. Leave a question in the comment section down below, or if there's another controller you want me to test out, leave that down in my comment section down below as well. I do have a few of these lined up right now, and I'm taking on a few more. I am actually kind of enjoying getting more and more into the controller space. I know these aren't my top viewed videos, but I think it's good content because I shop for controllers, and I assume that everybody else here does too. But that's all I got for you today. Don't forget to comment, rate, subscribe, share this video with your friends because sharing is caring, and we care about each other here. It also helps grow the channel and helps grow our community, and I think that's pretty freaking cool. But that's all I got. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye!